Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott. Fellas, we truly have Western Canada covered. Hodge, you're in Winnipeg at the moment. I'm in Regina. JC Abbott is in Vancouver, and we're about to descend on the peg for the 112th Grey Cup, just like a couple teams, the Montreal Alouettes and the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
It's going to be great. I can't wait. The weather, actually, the last forecast I saw was projecting +2 for game day, which honestly, like third week in November in Winnipeg, +2. I mean, JC's going to be cold because he's a soft West Coast boy, but the rest of us are going to be feeling nice and toasty warm.
I'm going to have to break out my long johns again. It only happens for Grey Cups when I head out to the prairies and out to Manitoba, but they'll be coming out this week. I must say, Grey Cups, combines, the moments when we get to travel and see each other are my favorite moments of the year because, frankly, gentlemen, with the couple of characters you are, I'm not entirely certain for most of the calendar year whether you're figments of my imagination or not. It's nice to actually see you in person and confirm I'm not going crazy.
You know when I know JC's real?
Well, I think that an alternate reality where JC's in a straitjacket, like shifting back and forth and telling a therapist, like, no, I swear to God, Hodge and Doug are real. And everyone's like, no, JC, they died in 1975. Like, oh, that sounds like a great dark comedy that I would watch.
How you
know
I'm
JC's real when I hear.
And that's when he's awake.
That's true. I snore when I'm awake.
Also, if you don't normally watch the YouTube and you just listen to the pod, first of all, thank you for listening to the pod. But I would encourage you to check the video today because Justin's T-shirt is the exact same color as the wall behind him at Hotel Sask, and it looks like he has a floating head. So if you watch that, please tweet at Dunk with the hashtag floating head dunk. It would bring me great joy.
This pod's off to a rip-roaring start, fellas. Honestly, I'm excited to get to Winnipeg. The weather seems to be cooperating. Stuart Johnston probably cooked it up. And JC's not messing around. It is a heck of a lot of fun when we get together. And I think the best part is just, sharing that time, but then also being able to connect with so many people who are passionate about not just the Canadian Football League, but Canadian football, fellas. Like, I think we're going to get together at a spot, Hodge, I'll let you detail it later, where we're going to watch the U Sports National semifinals together. And, even just us as a crew doing that together over the years has been a great Saturday leading into the Grey Cup. So very much looking forward to getting to the peg.
I will also say I signed my first autograph this week. At a BC Lions practice.
Hey.
That's how much people enjoy the podcast, and I'm pretty sure this very sweet lady had a book of player autographs, and she asked me to sign, and I think I tanked the value of the entire thing just putting pen to paper. But there are some passionate people out there who love the 3 Down podcast, and we will meet a number of them this weekend or this week in Winnipeg. If you do see us, don't be afraid. Come up, say hi. We always love to chat.
I was at the airport this morning, and there was a big, long line of people. I said, what are you guys waiting for? They said, JC. And half of them were holding autograph books. The other half were holding baseball bats. So be careful, bro. Be careful.
There was more bats than books, I bet.
Some of those people holding the bats would be Riders fans because on the post-game show after the Riders won the West Final over the BC Lions, JC, there was literally a caller that called in to say and tell JC Abbott that it's not the BC Lions time. It's the Riders time. I read his article on 3DownNation. You need to let him know. So we appreciate the support of our readers, viewers, and listeners. And I want to give a shout out to Clay, who I met at the West Final at Mosaic Stadium. He came over for a quick chat and said he lives in Brandon, Manitoba as a Riders fan. And it was pretty good for him because it's in the middle, at least in this situation, for him to come to the West Final and then to go to the Grey Cup. So lots more of those
Yep.
stories, I'm sure, to come. And JC, I suppose you should probably bring a Sharpie to Winnipeg at this point.
You should.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
Brandon,
I'm gonna be-
Manitoba, by the way, is about 50% Rider fans. I lived in Brandon for many years, and it's about 50-50. So I'd imagine the group of combines and other farm equipment shooting 6 hours east right now to get to the Grey Cup. It's going to grow as it goes, right? Like it's picking up in Saskatoon, and it's going to get bigger in Regina, and it's going to get bigger as they go through all the different awesome little towns in Saskatchewan, and it's going to grow in Brandon and Souris and all the places where, yeah, there's a lot of Manitoba Rider fans. Absolutely.
Imagine a big green and white combine decked out in Riders gear just pulls up to Princess Auto Stadium.
It's probably going to
That would
happen,
be
dude.
Epic.
Well, and while we are talking about things that aren't related to football and probably driving our listeners crazy, the University of Manitoba campus, where the Princess Auto Stadium is located, originated as the agricultural area for U of M. U of M's campus was initially downtown. The Ag Center was, and that's why the U of M campus is far south in Winnipeg. It was originally not even in the city. And at some point, I don't know why, they were just like, hey, let's move all of our campus down to where the ag is. So my point is there's a strong history for agriculture at the University of Manitoba. And in fact, my grandfather studied agriculture at the university. So I think that it would bring a tear to my eye, boys, to see a combine on campus at the U of M.
Let's make it happen. Somebody in Rider Nation got pulled up to the Grey Cup in a big old green and white combine. Let's get to some football, boys. We're discussing the Saskatchewan Roughriders opening as favorites over the Montreal Alouettes in the 112th Grey Cup.
Critical offseason questions facing the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Ottawa approving major renovations to TD Place Stadium.
Who could be the next Toronto Argos head coach?
And the 4 remaining teams competing for the Vanier Cup. But first, the BC Lions lost the West Final to the Saskatchewan Roughriders despite arguably being the better team. JC, was that a game the Lions gave away? And to what extent do you blame BC for the loss?
Look, it's never just on one team in professional football, and you have to give credit to the Saskatchewan Roughriders who came up big when it mattered most in clutch moments. But the BC Lions lost this game. Let's be real about that. And it's important having that context given the fact that the week before, when they won the West semifinal over the Calgary Stampeders, we talked about how that was a game that they probably didn't deserve to win, and they pulled it out. Well, in the West final, they had the opportunity to win this game, right? They had the lead. They had the ball twice inside of 3 minutes with the best player in the Canadian Football League possessing the opportunity to end this thing. And they couldn't get it done. They could not even get a first down in either scenario. And then at the end of the game, the defense did not execute when the Riders needed a touchdown. They were too soft. They allowed Trevor Harris to hit intermediate routes, and they gave up a winning touchdown. But even getting back earlier in the game, you look at some of the mistakes that the BC Lions made. The missed field goal by Sean White, the interception that bounced off of Keon Hatcher's chest and off CJ Rivas and into the hands of Marcus Sales down there inside the 10-yard line. You look at the drops that they had throughout the game, which killed a number of drives and led to this team having 9 total 2-and-outs. That's a failure to execute, right? That is a team that did not play up to the best of its abilities when it mattered most. And for all of the heroics that Nathan Rourke was able to accomplish in this game, it didn't matter because they weren't consistent enough and they didn't happen in that critical final 3 minutes. Kudos to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They deserve to be in the Grey Cup. They have been the best team in the CFL this season. But when Rider fans call into the postgame show and get upset for saying that the BC Lions wasted their moment, I'm not talking about this game being their moment or as if the BC Lions were somehow entitled to going to a Grey Cup and winning the Grey Cup, but they had a moment. When you have the best player in the league with the ball in his hands and a chance to win the game essentially with a first down, and you can't get a single yard on a QB draw because Xander Horvath gets stood up and knocked down by A.J. Allen and Rourke gets tackled at the line of scrimmage, that means you wasted your moment. The Riders didn't waste theirs.
It wasn't just one moment for the BC Lions, JC. It was two. The BC Lions had two chances to run the clock out and continue their way to Winnipeg, and it didn't happen. I get it that for most of the game, Nathan Rourke played pretty well, and at points I felt like BC had control in the game. But when it came down to those final minutes, and let's reiterate, like I've said multiple times on the podcast, football is a 60-minute game. That the BC Lions had multiple opportunities to get to the Grey Cup. Now, you're right. That A.J. Allen play on a critical 2nd and 3, shedding Horvath, and then making the tackle,
Best
saved
defensive play of the year.
a whole lot of questions about Corey Mace and kicking a field goal late in that game. I don't know if I want to go as far as you and say it was the best defensive player of the year. It was the most critical one, certainly, for the Saskatchewan Roughriders so far in their 2025 season. It was massive. So, when I look at the other side of it, to your point, JC, I felt the Riders took advantage of those opportunities that BC left on the table. You have to give full credit to Trevor Harris for leading a late drive after Mace did elect to kick the field goal and trust his defense and get his team into the end zone with Tommy Neal beating Gary Peters on a slant route to catch a touchdown that will live for a long time in Riders lore and will be amplified if the Riders are able to go on and beat Montreal in the Grey Cup. So I think we need to give credit to Saskatchewan. Trevor Harris was talking tough leading into the game. I think he wanted to set a tone, saying we're the big dogs decisively, and then also said he didn't have any time to talk about Nathan Rourke because he believed it was the Riders' time, and he beat Rourke straight up any way you slice it. That's what happened. Now, could things have been different for BC in terms of the play calls and the way they went about it late in that football game where they had not one, but two and outs? Certainly so. But credit Trevor Harris, the Riders defense, and Tommy Neal for rising to the occasion and getting it done to get to the Grey Cup.
You have to give the Riders credit. I'm not suggesting anything to the opposite, but I do think that the Lions left a ton of opportunities on the table. So I'm in agreement with you both. I think honestly, I mean, watching that first quarter in particular, you just got the feeling like, like these Lions are going to regret not making some hay here because they had open receivers. Nathan Rourke was delivering good passes. And there were three, at least, that I could think of that were just flat out drops. And there were a couple more. It was like, okay, that ball wasn't perfectly placed, but like, this is the playoffs. You need to be making that catch. And I wonder how much the weather was a factor in that. Obviously, the Riders got to practice in this weather all week. The BC Lions did not. It was cold at the West Final. I want to bury Buck Pierce a little bit for his play calling at the end of the game, the quarterback draw. I get putting Nathan Rourke as your best player, right? Putting the ball in his hands. But if you watch the quarterback draw on 2nd and 3 late in that game, James Butler runs onto the flat and nobody goes with him. There's 2 defenders and 2 blockers. And it's like, well, I get running the ball. You don't want to risk an incompletion, which stops the clock. But at the same time, like, it's almost like the BC or the Saskatchewan Roughriders never believed for a second they were going to put the ball in the air. And I think when you've got the best player in the league at quarterback, maybe that's a situation, especially you only did 3 yards. That is a spot you could put the ball in the air because there was no room for Nathan Rourke to operate. It was a run first call defensively. And so I guess you can give Corey Mace credit there for winning that chess match, but I didn't like the play calling from Buck Pierce. Fans in Winnipeg have been complaining, I think to some extent rightfully so, about the play calling of Buck Pierce in the playoffs for quite some time. And I thought that reared its head a little bit in that game on Saturday in that West final. The thing I want to talk about, though, boys, and I'll preface this by saying Corey Mace is a great coach. And on this show, I think when he got hired, or if not after he got, it was not long after he started his tenure in Riderville. I said on this show, you can pull the clip, that he was going to win a Grey Cup in Saskatchewan. I said that. So I got immense respect for Corey Mace. But that decision to kick the field goal was awful. Like awful. And the fact that his team won the game does not make it a good decision, right? A coach could choose to kneel down 60 times in a game on offense and win the game 3-0. And that would still mean that the choice to kneel instead of trying to move the football on offense would be bad, right? You could make a bad decision and win. And Corey Mace made a bunch of other good decisions. Again, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm not saying that he didn't have his team ready to play or that they didn't deserve to win. Those things are all true. But that decision was awful. He made a one-score game a one-score game. Like, if you're that confident in your defense, which apparently was confidence that was well-placed, because, again, the Riders forced two and outs after that, why not go for it? They went for it earlier in the game and got the touchdown, which was a great play, right? Why not gamble again? And then if you miss, it's like, well, BC's on their own 5-yard line. So, we quick 2 and out. We're already in field goal range anyway. Like, I don't begin to understand that logic. And had the game gone the other way, all of Rider Nation would be eviscerating their poor head coach for that call. So the Riders won. Again, they deserve to win. Full credit. But that decision was baffling. I thought it was, to be perfectly frank, awful. Just awful.
Rider Nation
I think
was
you make
still questioning the decision on the postgame show on 620 CKRM, Hodge. That was what the majority of callers calling in wanted to talk about. Mainly, I think they would agree with you, but there were some other callers, and I think to provide balance, it's worth pointing it out, that felt like, okay, we can understand that perhaps Corey Mace was looking at it exactly the way it played out. I'm going to kick the field goal here, and then I know we still need to get a touchdown, but now we have a touchdown to win the game. And he really did rely on his defense. But on the flip side of it, to your point, there's also no guarantee that you get the football back. So I think it's something that you laid out very well, but we just need to look at all aspects of it.
Well, but you're also down in the shadows of the uprights. If you get the touchdown first, then you can kick a game-winning field goal, and you don't have to get close to the upright. You don't have to get that close. Right? He was saying, no, I trust my offense to go down and drive the football, the full 80 yards or whatever it's going to be to get the score. And again, credit to the offense, it did that, but the offense wasn't exactly driving the ball that well all day. And when they did make hay, it was largely along the ground, which you can't really do late in the game because it chews the clock. So, again, it worked out. And maybe he realized that, and I think there's some criticism that needs to be levied at BC defensive coordinator Mike Benavides, not for what his defense did in the first 57 minutes, because I thought what they did in the first 57 was great. But the last 3 minutes I thought was putrid, because the zone drops for the deep defenders were so incredibly deep, it left all kinds of hay to be made in that intermediate 20 to 25 yard range. And honestly, in a late game situation, that's the part of the field I do not want to give up, because if you give up a shot over the top, 80 yards to Kean Schaefer-Baker or Sam Emelis or whoever, well, now you've got a minute left. And as the BC Lions, you're down 3 points. You just need a field goal to put it to overtime, or you need a touchdown to score. And you're giving Nathan Rourke the ball with a minute left. Instead, the Riders were able to kill basically the entire clock with a drive with Trevor Harris playing pitch and catch with his receivers 25 to 30 yards down the field. So I did not like that at all from BC. I also thought going to a 3-man rush was a mistake. I thought they should have rushed 4. But yeah, I did not like the decision from Corey Mace. at all. You go for the touchdown. You trusted your offense to get it earlier in the game. Trust them again. Trust your offense. Get the touchdown, and then you only need a field goal to get the win. Or better yet, go for the touchdown and then go for the 2-point conversion and say, "Suck it, BC. We got the lead in our own barn. How you like them apples?"
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Hodge, and I think sometimes we run the risk of being results-based in our analysis, right? Something works out and we praise it, something fails and we criticize it. I think it's important to look at the process. And the reality is, by any statistical metric, Corey Mace chose the least likely path to get to victory. And it worked out, right? Sometimes you roll the dice and you get 2 6s. That's always a possibility. And he went with his gut. The defense delivered. But I think if you play that game again and again and again, 99% of the time, he's not going to get that same result, right? He took the harder path. He made those decisions. And I don't even think the touch or the field goal was the more egregious of the two. I think the punt on 3rd and 10 with what was it, a minute 40 left in that game, that was an even more questionable decision because at that point, yes, you stopped them once, but very realistically, if the Riders don't make that stop on that 2nd and 3, I think that game is over. And part of the reason why I say that was the best defensive play of the year, Dunk, which is probably a little bit of hyperbole, but it was teach tape, right? The way AJ Allen came into the hole, stacked and shed that blocker to make the tackle. You know, there have been some spectacular defensive plays this season, but I'm not going to take Robert Carter Jr.'s interception and show it to the kids on my high school team and say, "See, this is how you do that," because they'll never be able to do that. But I can take that clip of AJ Allen in crunch time and say, "This is how you stack and shed a block in the hole. This is how you make a T tackle. Like, this is exactly what it has to look like." And that, to me, is as spectacular as anything on a highlight reel because of the way he executed it. To your point, Hodge, the call by Pierce, I didn't hate the fact that it was a QB draw. I like the ballsiness of keeping it in Rourke's hands when it mattered. I think the mistake he made was keeping Horvath in as the lead. Because when you have a 230-pound running back in the backfield, nobody is going to read run because they are looking at that option knowing that he can power for 3 yards. And so that kept Allen and others tight in the box because they were
nobody's going to read
anticipating.
pass.
Yeah, sorry. Nobody's going to read pass because they're expecting the handoff in that short yardage scenario. So that kept Allen and everybody in the box. I think that was the aspect of that play you can question. If you had flexed everybody out, gone empty backfield, and all of a sudden they think, okay, they're throwing the short ball here, and Rourke takes off. In my estimation, he probably gets that yardage. But because Horvath was in, the defense recognized there was the potential that they could run the football. And then the final drive from the BC defense, I think you're right to criticize Mike Benavides to a point, right? The 3-man rushes I thought were incredibly passive, but there's an execution aspect to that as well. And the Lions early on in the season did not execute in those 2-minute drill type scenarios very well defensively. I know Benavides was pulling his hair out as they tried to figure out solutions to that. They seemed like they had it fixed down the stretch in the winning streak, but they regressed in this last game. And when you look at that catch that Dante Myers made to get them inside the 10-yard line down to the 5 or the 4 or whatever it was in that circumstance, the 23-yarder, and you freeze frame it at the moment he caught that ball, there are 5 BC defenders encircling him, all staring at him, and nobody is making a play, right? To me, that speaks to the performance and the execution of the players on the field, not necessarily the scheme that was called. They needed to have better situational awareness, and they needed to not be quite so soft in that coverage because, as you said, if they score on that play, it's not the end of the world. You give Rourke the same amount of time he had last week to go down and kick a tying field goal or try and win the game. But because you gave up those 20-yard shots, you can't do that. And it ultimately cost them.
The Buck Pierce quarterback draw play call, I think we need to look at it for multiple angles as well. Okay, if Horvath makes the block on A.J. Allen, Rourke likely picks up a first down. We can't just say it was a bad play call because A.J. Allen made a great teach tape play, and I totally agree with you, JC. I would also agree on, potentially flexing out and going six-pack and then calling a quarterback draw. And to take it one step further, I think it probably would have been better to have Rourke on the move with a run-pass option. That's what he was so good at during the game. Multiple times he got Antoine Brooks Jr. to bite on a pump fake and leave his feet, which he should never do. And Brooks Jr. took at least one terrible angle on Rourke's touchdown run where he still got him to bite on the pump fake. So I think I would have had Rourke in run-pass option because that was one of the facets of the offense that was working so well. So I don't necessarily have a huge issue with the play call because, again, if it works, then we're talking about Buck Pierce in a totally different light. Do I think it was the best play call in that situation? Probably not. I think your analysis is bang on in terms of Horvath being on the football field. But overall in this football game, if the Lions just simply caught more passes, I don't even know if this game would have been close, fellas. Like, let's talk about Nathan Rourke delivering a catchable ball to Keon Hatcher that he drops. I think he would tell you he should catch that football that bounces off C.J. Revis, who is then taking Hatcher to the turf. And then Marcus Sales gets one of the most fortunate interceptions I think that we've ever seen, right? A.J. Allen knows a thing or two about getting bounces from the BC Lions and getting an interception as well. So I'm not saying that those were necessarily lucky plays that went the Riders' way. But if BC made the plays that were there, James Butler, a couple early drops in the first quarter, didn't help the offense get off to a great start. And BC, I think, could have really been in control of the game. I think you could look at some of those other plays for Saskatchewan, but those drops, and I know the CFL doesn't track it anymore, which I can't understand, so we don't know exactly how many, stick out to me as
5 or 6,
another facet.
depending on how you define it.
There you go. So 5 or 6 that really hurt BC.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats lost the East Final to the Montreal Alouettes on a walk-off field goal from Jose Maltos Diaz, extending their league-long Grey Cup drought by another year. Bo Levi Mitchell indicated he has to have some important conversations before making any decisions about his playing future. Where do the Tabbies go from here?
It starts and ends with Bo Levi Mitchell. Is he going to continue to play or not? Because that's going to decide a lot of your cap allotment for the 2026 CFL season. Perhaps I shouldn't say a lot, but a good chunk of it. And that has to be the decision that's at the forefront at the moment. I think that Bo Levi Mitchell can continue playing at a high level and potentially a 5,000-yard passing yard season, I should say, type of level, especially with Scott Milanovic. And it's gotten to the point where Bo Levi Mitchell has gotten so good at getting rid of the football that he doesn't really take big shots too often, which I think can help extend his career. So that is the number one question in Steeltown. I know Ticats fans don't want to hear it, but it's worth reiterating. It's been since 1999. That's the longest drought, a long time since the Ticats have won a Grey Cup and brought it back to Hamilton. So I think in order to do that, you have to figure out what you're doing at quarterback and then proceed from there.
I mean, I think there might be one shoe to drop before that, and that who's the team's general manager, right? We're in kind of uncharted territory here where obviously the Tabbies lost their general manager, Ted Gavaya, in September. And I think Ted put together a great staff in Hamilton. I think there's a lot of really smart people in Hamilton, but obviously somebody needs to be the GM. I mean, I suppose technically this team not too long ago did have kind of this weird committee front office that I think at the end of the day, those are a little bit silly, but regardless, I think you need to figure out who your general manager is going to be. I would expect, or at least I think it would make a lot of sense to do something internal. But I think a lot of the front office staff that Ted put in place were relatively young, right? I mean, if you look at Alex Russell, he's still a young guy. Cyril Penn is a very young guy. Tom Flaxman, not old, but not young. But a guy who just broke into the CFL, right? Has almost 20 years of U Sports experience. So I'm curious to see what gets done there. But yeah, Bo Levi Mitchell, certainly a massive shoe. I watched his avail yesterday, and the thing that he stressed over and over was how much he loves playing under Scott Milanovich, how Milanovich coaches him and makes him genuinely better, and how much fun he has playing with guys. It looked like Bo and this is remarkable considering, again, just 2 years ago, almost to the day, Bo was riding the pine with Matthew Schultz, struggling, to be perfectly frank, in that playoff game a couple of years ago. Well, now Bo is out here talking about how much fun he's having and how close the locker room is. And Bo, I don't think, is one to say stuff like that unless he really means it. He was pretty honest a couple of years ago with how disappointed he was to not be in that playoff game, how he didn't think he'd be back in Hamilton. So the fact that immediately after this playoff game, he's talking about how much fun he has, how tight these guys are. Like, if Bo is not back, it's not going to be because he doesn't love playing with these teammates or love being in Hamilton. I think it's because he's just done, right? He is a pending free agent based on his comments. I'd be pretty shocked if he left Hamilton to go to another CFL team, though it is technically a possibility. One thing that should be noted is that when you look at the highest QB payment list, Bo is in the bottom third of starters, and that's been the case for a couple of years now. He signed a mega deal in 2023 and then took a massive restructure after a poor injury-riddled season that year in Hamilton. He's since, in the last 2 years, proven he can win, he can stay healthy, and he can play at an MOP level. So I think that's another question that needs to be asked. If Bo is back, does he say, hey, I'm back, but I need that $600,000 that the top quarterbacks in this league are getting. I'm not making $350 anymore because I've been lighting it up, and my remaining years in this league are limited. So I don't want to speak for Bo. I'm excited to talk to Bo about this. He'll obviously be in Winnipeg for Grey Cup week as the East Division's nominee for MOP. We'll also get the chance to talk to Nathan Rourke as he will be in Winnipeg as the West Division's nominee for MOP. But yes, this is a huge decision for the Tabbies to make, because the other thing I think, again, we've talked about a little bit, but Taylor Powell, right? Considering Scott Milanovich has developed almost half the starting quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, if you count guys like Trevor Harris and Zach Claris and Cody Fajardo dating back to their time with the Toronto Argonauts, Taylor Powell is a guy who would be at or near the top of my wish list if I was a QB needy team out there. And I'm sure the Tabbies, after investing that many years in Taylor Powell, do not want to lose him. So if Bo is on the fence, I think it should be asked, as much as maybe this sounds nuts. Do you say, hey, let's lock in the kid now? Because if there's any chance Bo's not back, we can't run the risk of losing both of these quarterbacks. So I'd imagine that internally, those are the types of conversations that are happening in Steeltown right now.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could ask Scott Milanovich that, if the CFL hadn't have, taken the Coach of the Year nominees out of Grey Cup week, so now we can't speak to them. It would have been great if we could have asked Scott that exact question in the coming days, but unfortunately, that has been taken out of our hands, at least for any in-person availabilities. When it comes to Bo Levi Mitchell, I sat here in this very spot a couple of years ago talking to you guys on the podcast, and I believe I pleaded with Bo Levi Mitchell to retire. I said, you've got a great future in broadcasting ahead of you. You've made your money. You're cemented as a Hall of Famer. Don't go back out there again. It's done. It's over. You're toast, essentially. And you know what? I was as wrong as a person could be. Bo Levi Mitchell has been incredible the last 2 seasons. He was especially exceptional this season. And now I sit here and I plead, Bo, Come back. We need more. I want to see 36-year-old Bo Levi Mitchell throw for another 5,000-yard season and try and get this Ticats team to a Grey Cup. I really do. I think that's an incredible storyline. I think his second half or his late career resurgence has been revelatory. I think it adds a mystique to his legacy, even though it was already cemented before this. And I want to see just how far he can take this thing. Now, the caveat that I will add to this is Bo Levi Mitchell deserves to be a $600,000 quarterback, right? We talked last week about whether Zach Collaros deserves to be that anymore. I think Bo Levi Mitchell deserves to be that now. But if Bo is smart, he won't be. He'll get himself a nice little raise. He's deserved that. He's earned that. He'll get himself some security, take away some of the incentives. But if he wants to truly break this drought in Hamilton, he will continue to be paid less than he is worth, because that allows them to put the pieces around him that have made this offense so explosive. You don't want to price out Kenny Lawler. You don't want to price out Tim White. You don't want to price out Keandre Smith and all these free agents that they've got to bring in. And you want the team to be able to add pieces. And yes, that's not Bo's responsibility. And no one would, blame him if he took every cent and every dollar that he is worth. Because as I said, he is a top-tier quarterback in this league, and he deserves to be paid like that. But if he wants that crown jewel on his legacy to break this streak, to bring it back to the hammer, if he shaves a little bit off what he's potentially worth, and they turn that into roster pieces, I think they'll be better off for it. And I truly believe the Ticats will be in Grey Cup contention once again next season.
I will quickly just go through. This is not a confirmed list, so we'll have the 100% confirmed list up on 3Down. But the Ticats free agent list, I wouldn't call it crazy daunting, but there are some big names here, guys. We've talked about Mitchell and Powell. For the record, Keandre Smith is under contract. He's not a free agent. That said, Shamar Bridges is a free agent. He's due a raise. And Tim White is also a free agent. We'll have to see if this team can afford Tim White and Kenny Lawler for another year. Those are two really big contracts in the receiving corps. 80% of the starting offensive line is free, including Brendan Bordner. Well, he sat for the playoffs, but left tackle Jordan Murray, who took the two really bad penalties, unfortunately for him, is a free agent. Quentin Barrett, right tackle, is a free agent, and Revenberg and Coulter Woodmansey are both free agents. The D-line and linebacker are pretty limited, but the secondary, most of the starting secondary is free, including Destin Talbert, who I thought had a fantastic season, Jamal Peters, Jonathan Moxey, and Stavros Katsantonis, and Deshaun Amos. So there are some big decisions to be made. Not so much in the front, right? That I thought the weakness of this Tabbies team coming into the season was that defensive front six. I thought they injected a ton of talent there. That group is under contract, but elsewhere they have some really big decisions to make.
Definitely. Let's see Bo Levi Mitchell continue to play. Trevor Harris out here doing it at 39 years old. Bo's only 35, I believe, at this point in time.
He turns 36 in March.
There you go. So we'll be 36 going into the 2026 CFL season. He can still do it. More Bo Levi Mitchell. See if he can do it for a few more years and perhaps at least give it a run to try to chase down Anthony Calvillo, which is a record that at one point in time he admitted he put down on paper and worked out the math and thought that it would be achievable. So we'll see if he continues to try to make his way towards that passing yardage mountain in terms of a CFL record. The Saskatchewan Roughriders opened as slight 1.5-point favorites over the Montreal Alouettes for the 112th Grey Cup in Winnipeg. Based on what you've seen all year, who do you see winning the CFL championship game?
Well, I mean, for the record, I picked the Riders to win the West Final by a field goal. So apparently I got my finger on the pulse of this team. I think I also picked the Alouettes to win by a field goal, but I'd have to go back and double check our picks. I've got the Riders winning if Davis Alexander is limited with that hamstring, right? And I'm glad that we are getting this show out on the Sunday, a full 7 days before this game, because by the time Grey Cup Sunday actually rolls around, everybody, including us and our listeners, is going to be sick of talking about Davis Alexander's stupid hamstring, right? This is a hamstring that kept him out of 11 games this year. And without him, this Alouettes team was not even pedestrian. They were bad, right? Defensively, they just could not quite stay in games with the number of turnovers that the offense had, the inability to move the football. And yes, I want to get this out of the way. There was one game the Alouettes had great quarterbacking without Davis Alexander in, and that was the game that McLeod Bethel-Thompson went into Regina and absolutely blew the doors off the Riders. So theoretically, if McLeod Bethel-Thompson plays on Grey Cup Sunday, we've seen him have tremendous success against this defense. Do I think it's repeatable? Probably not. But I don't want to do MBT disservice by not mentioning that, yes, he did blow the doors off the Riders in one of his starts. He didn't have a lot of success other than that start. But regardless, the Alouettes are a completely different unit with Davis Alexander under center. He's a burgeoning league star. I know his antics have turned some people off. Frankly, I think his antics are awesome. This is a market in Montreal that needs star power, right? Montreal, and this is true of the Canadiens. This is true, and this isn't even just my observation. This is talking to people who are lifelong Montrealers. Montreal could be a bit of a fair weather town, right? If you're not winning, the fans stop coming. They stop paying attention. Well, Davis Alexander does nothing but win. He's now 13-0, playoffs included, as a career CFL starter. And the fact that he hot dogs after every single 8-yard carry is awesome. Is it a little annoying? I get that. I understand it if fans don't like it, but I think it's amazing, right? We need more quarterback star power in this league. And Davis Alexander is serving it up on a silver platter, saying, see how you like them apples. And he's doing it while wearing a white undershirt to interviews with TSN, which is weird. But again, I like it. It's interesting. It's different. It's unique. Mike Riley had his hats. Davis Alexander has his stained undershirts. Okay? It works for him.
I didn't see any stains on there. It was nice and white, bro.
Well,
You talking about your undershirts?
I don't wear undershirts, and I
Hodge
don't
has
want
stained underwear.
What? JC, come on, that's gross.
That's nasty. But getting back to the game at hand here, I think if Davis Alexander plays and is 100%, the Montreal Alouettes are going to win this game. If Davis Alexander is a shell of himself and he's hobbling, then I'm all on the Riders, which is why I'm not going to be putting any money on this game. And I think anybody betting on the game should probably, and this I should qualify this. This is not actual advice, but hypothetically, I would wait until some practices had taken place before I prognosticate too much on this game, because Davis Alexander, if he's not able to move, right, his superpower is his ability to break the pocket, get out of the backfield and move the ball like a running back. And in doing so, keep his eyes down the field and launch it 40 to 50 yards down to the Tyson Philpotts of the world that they have as playmakers. They got a bunch of them in Montreal. They got Tyler Snead, Tyson Philpott, Charleston Rambo had a really nice game, Austin Mack, right? Like, they've got a ton of weapons there. So if he's at full health, I like the Alouettes to win. If he's limited, I think the Saskatchewan Roughriders win this game just like they won the West Final. They're going to ground and pound with that tough offensive line, AJ Ouellette punching people in the mouth, and then occasionally leaping over them like Superman, and that defense swarming to the football like they do really well. So that is my prognostication. I have a caveat in there. I admittedly don't like having a caveat, but again, we do not know what the hamstring looks like for Davis Alexander right now, and we're probably not going to get a read on it until Tuesday, is I'm guessing when the team will hold its first practice, if they even practice on Tuesday.
I'm going to follow your advice here, Hodge. I'm not going to make a prediction for this Grey Cup game until we know more about Davis Alexander's injury, because I agree with you. I think that is a critical piece to the storyline of this game and to who will win it, is just how mobile he is able to be on the biggest stage, and we just don't know yet. The Alouettes were a dramatically different team without him in the lineup. They're a dramatically different team when he's not at full strength. And I think you even saw late in that game, although they were able to get that game-winning drive, they were just a different offense when he didn't trust his legs than when he did. So you can stay tuned for our picks later in the week. I will hold off on that for now. What I will say is the Saskatchewan Roughriders absolutely deserve to open as favorites in this Grey Cup game for a number of reasons. They've been the best team in the CFL overall by record. I think they are by far the deepest team in the CFL. I think they have an exceptional defense. And this is going to be a game where they have almost home field like advantage, right? It's not being played in Regina, it's being played in Winnipeg, but you have to imagine that the Rider faithful is going to make that trip in their combines, like we talked about earlier in the show, and fill up that stadium where, yes, there will be some Alouettes fans there in the building, there always are, but that is a much more difficult trek for a fan to make, particularly if they want to do it on short notice. I think there's some Rider fans right now in Western Canada, particularly in the Prairie provinces, that have said, hey, I think we can probably get some tickets on the resale market right now from those Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans. You want to head down? And they're blowing up their plans. They're calling in sick to work this week just to be there for a Riders Grey Cup week in Winnipeg. I'm guessing we'll see a lot of green in the stadium, and that is going to tilt things in Saskatchewan's favor. The last point I want to add here, boys, is I think this is a tremendous matchup from a CFL perspective, right? Maybe you would have liked to see Nathan Rourke in this game because of the star power. I think that's a valid point. But the Saskatchewan Roughriders are your biggest brand, and they're the draw on television. And they're going to create a tremendous amount of intrigue and excitement and media coverage from this game, which is already covered far more than any other game in the CFL season. But now you're bringing that Sasky touch to it as well. That's huge for the CFL, and I think that'll translate to television numbers. On the flip side, Davis Alexander is turning into a marquee star. That is huge for that storyline. And I think we saw the last time that the Montreal Alouettes were in the Grey Cup that they move the needle for television because they bring in the Francophone audience, which might otherwise tune out of that broadcast if their team wasn't in it. I think we're going to see some really tremendous numbers from this game, and that is big for the league because while we haven't seen the numbers lately, I think it's fair to say that they got hosed a little bit down the stretch at the end of the regular season when games didn't matter, and in that first round of the playoffs when they were up against the Blue Jays, or at least playing on the same day. I bet if those numbers were published, that they would be lower than typical. This Grey Cup, I expect, will be higher than most Grey Cups because of this matchup, appealing to the biggest fan base and to the Francophone fan base, and that is good news for the league.
It's definitely the most ideal matchup for the Canadian Football League for the reasons JC laid out. Montreal is going to bring a big media contingent. There'll be a bunch of people going from Saskatchewan in terms of media covering this football game. And I think in terms of the television ratings, that number could possibly be the biggest Grey Cup rating in the last number of years. We'll definitely track that. We have all those numbers on the site. So we'll see what turns out there. There's never any guarantee. So we'll just have to see what it provides. But there's no doubt that Davis Alexander is an absolute rising star. Polarizing, yes. And I don't even care what you think about him because the CFL just needs not more star quarterback power, John Hodge. They need more stars. Like Davis Alexander is a guy that could go to another level in terms of his stardom. I think even without a win, just even being part of Grey Cup week, I felt like going into the West and East final weekend that arguably the best matchup would have been Nathan Rourke against Davis Alexander, because then the CFL is guaranteed to get a young, rising star quarterback a Grey Cup somewhat relatively early in their starting careers. I know these guys aren't in their early 20s anymore. They're trending more towards their late 20s. But from that standpoint, there was an ability to really build star power. But there's no questioning the power of Rider Nation, the fact that Saskatchewan hasn't been to a Grey Cup for a long time, since 2013. And the Riders, guys, it seems wild to consider this, have won the least amount of Grey Cups of any team in the Canadian Football League, with 4, considering the support that Saskatchewan and Rider Nation gives its football team. It just seems like such a small number. So make no mistake, you can feel the buzz in the Queen City. You can feel the buzz amongst Rider Nation. This is a massive deal. And in an ideal world, every other market in the CFL would be similar to the Saskatchewan Roughriders and Regina and Saskatoon and all the people that drive in and even listen, literally, guys, from around the world. There's a caller on the postgame show. His name's Mark. Calls in from Australia. Every single Riders game, win or loss. There were people calling from Nevada and Florida after the West Final. So Rider Nation is real. I'm not saying that the other fan bases aren't strong and passionate. Hamilton definitely is. I've experienced that firsthand. But to really push this league forward, I'm going to challenge some fans out here and hope that the CFL can bring in some new fans to get to the level of Rider Nation, because it is real. The passion is there. And I think that's why this Grey Cup has the potential to be really unique.
I hope Mark has a good phone plan, first of all, because that could get very expensive very quickly.
There's a toll-free number, so we got to cover it.
Oh, okay. That's nice. Well, I
does
hope
that cover
doesn't-
long distance, though?
I was going to say, does that cover the longest distance imaginable? But regardless, the other thing I'll add is, look, I appreciate the passion from Rider Nation. Absolutely, of course. They sold out the West Final. Full credit to them. But the top fan base in the CFL for many years now has been the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And there's no arguing that. Anybody who would argue that, I'm sorry, has the most green-tinted glasses imaginable. They sell the most tickets. They buy the most merch. They show up and they show out better than anybody.
Do they buy the most merch, though?
Well, okay. I suppose
Rider
I'd
Nation
have
buys
to.
a lot of merch, and if you really want to get into the details, how many people live in Winnipeg, Hodge?
Around 800,000. We're doing
What's the
population theory
in
now.
Regina?
But you've made a you've repeatedly said on the show that more. Wait, so hold on. So you're going to sit here and tell me that Rider fans are better because, well, okay, yeah, they sell out 2 games a year.
I'm not
but
necessarily
there's less
saying
of
they're
them.
better. I'm saying, what's the population of Regina?
It's like what, 175?
It's small. It's like less than double what it is in Winnipeg. So you consider some of those factors and how far Rider Nation drives. I'm not saying that the Bombers don't deserve credit for selling out the building 14 straight times. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's some other factors here that should be considered when we have this conversation.
The point I'm making is the Bombers, and yes, obviously winning helps. I'm not saying winning doesn't help. And the Bombers have won a ton of games the last 5-6 years. But they're the most watched team in the stadium. They're the most watched team on television, right? They've been number 1 for a while now. The reason I bring it up is I want to ask Bomber fans to still show up and show out for the Grey Cup. Because one of my disappointments when the Grey Cup was in Regina in 2022 was looking at a stadium that was 60% full for that game. And I know that Bomber fans did not buy their Grey Cup tickets 6-7 months ago going, oh, I'm super excited to watch the Saskatchewan Roughriders play the Montreal Alouettes in a stadium that's going to be 30% green. But guess what? The Grey Cup only comes to your city once every 10 years. You don't get to control who's in the game, but what you do get to control is how big of a party you make it. So I know it's not the matchup the fans in Winnipeg wanted, but if you want to be the number 1 fans in the CFL, part of that is supporting the CFL, not just the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So show up, show out, be loud. If you want to cheer against Saskatchewan, then do that. Show up and cheer for, be the world's biggest Montreal Alouettes fan for 3 hours. Or if you just want to go and cheer for a good game, do that. But show up, show out, make it a great week. the three of us, as mentioned, are going to be around for a whole bunch of it. And there's going to be a ton of other great CFL fans as well. So hopefully it's a great week in the Peg, even with the matchup not being what Bomber fans wanted it to be.
Let me just get this in, okay? Winnipeg's estimated population currently, 850,000.
Why are we talking about populations?
Regina is 250,000, bro.
It's the dumbest
I'm no
argument I've ever heard.
mathematician, but Winnipeg is more than 3 times bigger than Regina. That's all I'm saying. The
Which
Bombers
also means
fan
there's
base has
other
been
things to do in Winnipeg.
unbelievable over the last
Winnipeg
number
has
of
an
years.
NHL team. And also, like, it's like 75% of the population of Manitoba lives in Winnipeg. Regina is a small fraction of the population of Saskatchewan. There's
That's
about
my
the
point
same number of
in
people
terms of
in
the
both
sellouts.
provinces.
That's my point, though.
Look,
For the sellouts specifically, there's no doubt the television ratings, all that said, and JC made a great point because of the winning, but I'm talking about for the sellouts, right? Things change, times change, and yeah, to be honest, some of it falls on the Roughriders. Wade Miller and the Blue Bombers have done a remarkable job, Hodge, as you know, getting out in the community and really aligning everybody in Winnipeg and beyond. I think the Roughriders need to up their game to that level to ensure that they have consistent sellouts and don't have to put on a big marketing push to be able to sell out a West Final that they knew they were hosting for a decent amount of time. That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to balance out some numbers.
New Ottawa Redblacks head coach and general manager Ryan Dinwiddie did an exclusive podcast with you, Dunk, after his introductory press conference this week. Among other comments, he suggested that his new job may actually take work off his plate despite the dual titles, considering he was already performing some GM duties without the title in Toronto. What does that say about the Argos' current front office situation?
It tells me that there is potentially a lack of organization over there and that the roles are not defined and perhaps a lack of people in the front office. Let's get this straight, okay? The Toronto Argonauts actually made a decision to side with Michael Pinball Clemens and John Murphy over Ryan Dinwiddie, who completely, dare I say, almost single-handedly changed the direction of that good old Argos ship when he came there. 2 Grey Cups in 5 years. CFL record regular season mark, 16-2. Turned Chad Kelly into an MOP. Put Nick Arbuckle into the MOP conversation. And the powers that be at MLSE did enough for Ryan Dinwiddie to say, okay, Ottawa, you're going to offer me a head coach and GM title? Yeah, I'm going to go take it. And no, I'm not going to go and shop your offer back to the team that I've been with and won 2 Grey Cups with because they disrespected me enough not to offer me that to begin with. It's unbelievable when you really think of this situation, fellas, and how it played out. The Argos and MLSE siding with Pinball Clemens and John Murphy. Like, when you peel this back, it just seems like the Argos ship doesn't have a true captain. And the one that was there, they decided, no, hey, we're just going to let you walk away and go to a division rival. Like, let's not get this twisted, okay? This bogus report that's out there, or this talk that Ryan Dinwiddie should have gone back to the Argos and gave them a chance to match, is ridiculous. He told us exclusively that he had had conversations with Keith Pelly weeks prior to the end of the regular season about a contract extension. Never saw one on paper. Now, he was under contract for the 2026 CFL season, but what people aren't talking about enough here is what actually happened behind the scenes for Ryan Dinwiddie to go to Ottawa. Okay? Let's just lay it out there. Some people want to whisper about it behind the scenes, but we're hard on players in this league for their conduct. We are hard on coaches at times, right? Ryan Dinwiddie himself celebrating and then telling the Edmonton Elks to enjoy the offseason. Well, I asked him about it. Did you regret that comment? Jason Moss has talked about his conduct as well. He used to be a guy that beat up Gatorade jugs on the sideline, and now he has improved. So I'm going to put it on the Toronto Argonauts to make a decision in terms of the conduct of their organization and what matters most. And we saw them completely, and I mean completely, bungle their messaging about what happened with Chad Kelly. That's all I'm going to say.
In 2022, the Toronto Argonauts had a team president. His name was Bill Manning. Now, Bill Manning also served as the president of Toronto FC, and there's some questions about how involved he actually was or how engaged he actually was with the Argonauts in the CFL. But still, they had a president. They also had an assistant general manager in Vince Magri, and they also had a director of football operations and a national scout in Alex Russell, and they also had a senior advisor in Jim Barker. Well, Magri has since gone to the NFL. He's with the Buffalo Bills. Alex Russell has received subsequent, I believe it's multiple promotions now. He's now with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And Jim Barker, I mean, yeah, he's a free agent right now, but he's a guy who's won multiple Grey Cups and has a ton of experience as a CFL head coach and a GM and all these things. Literally all of these people, when they left the Toronto Argonauts, were not replaced. Like, Toronto is just Mike Pinball Clemens, who, yes, he's the general manager, but there are questions about how much he is involved as a true GM would be. There's John Murphy, whose official title is senior advisor to the general manager. And they did hire, this was never announced, but they hired someone named Melissa Frith to be their director of football operations. And I've actually met Melissa. I met her in 2023 when I was covering an Argos Alouettes game in Montreal, and she's very nice, but she's not a football person. So you went from, the point is, like, a top executive and a staff of 4 quote-unquote football people, 5 quote-unquote football people running this thing, to 2. And at a certain point, that brain drain is going to kill your organization on the field. And that's obviously what we saw this season, where in a span of 2 years, this team went from 16 wins to 5. Yes, this team probably would have won more games had Chad Kelly been healthy, but still, I don't think anybody looked at the Toronto Argonauts in 2025 and went, wow, this is still a team that other clubs would look at as being aspirational. Like, wow, this is a top flight organization in the CFL on the field. It's just not a thing. So when you then lose your head coach, who, by the way, is still listed on the Toronto Argonauts website as their head coach and offensive coordinator, that's a separate issue. But when you lose him, like, this is a panic button situation. If I'm a Toronto Argonauts fan.
Is Ryan Dinwiddie coaching 2 teams in the East? The Argos and the Redblacks?
Somebody once owned 2 teams.
David Braley of head coaches.
Yeah, exactly. And Pinball once played and coached this team. That happened once. I think they even won that game. So maybe we shouldn't be too critical about that. But regardless, yeah, I think it's a mess off the field in Toronto right now. Mike O'Shea is a hell of a coach. I think everybody knows that. We've talked about this on our emergency pod, that Mike O'Shea will be at the top of their list. If I'm Mike O'Shea, I question why the heck I would go to this situation, especially considering this team is playing 12 away games in 2026. To me, if it's not Mike O'Shea, the whispers I'm hearing behind the scenes, stronger and stronger, are that the next head coach of the Toronto Argonauts will be Chris Jones. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying the whispers are getting stronger to the point that I feel like it's worth mentioning on the pod. So Chris Jones, who obviously worked very closely with John Murphy back with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, a little under 10 years ago. A move, by the way, that happened, I think, largely during Grey Cup week in Winnipeg. So, hey, history repeating itself maybe a little bit. We've got, that possibility in Toronto.
I think you did a wonderful job of laying out that situation in Toronto, Hodge. Just 3 dedicated football operations employees listed for them. It should be noted, co-defensive coordinator and DB coach Jason Shivers also has pro player personnel assistant in his title, and then video or quality control coach and video assistant Marcus Grandison is also listed as a scouting assistant. So they do a little bit of both aspects of the job, but certainly the Argos are a team that is spread incredibly thin, and that falls to their head coach to pick up a lot of the slack in terms of organizing things for daily scheduling, for organizing scouting schedules, for evaluating players. And the Argos have sent people to events. Like, it's not like they're missing, but I know from my experience going down to places like the College Gridiron Showcase or even the UBC Pro Day, it's typically not full-time employees that are going on the behalf of the Toronto Argonauts. It's people who are affiliated with the organization either regularly as sort of freelance scouts, as it were, or people who have been asked to go on behalf of the organization because they have some relationship with somebody in that building. But it is not the core group of people typically who is at all of these events pounding the pavement looking for talent. And I believe that eventually you see that drain happen within the organization, and we saw it happen this year. By contrast, the Ottawa Redblacks, yes, I think you can point to their results on the field and question whether they are good enough, but at the very least, they had those people in the building. And I think Ryan Dinwiddie is right in assuming that he's going to have to do a little bit less work just based on their organizational structure. While Toronto had 3 dedicated football operations employees last year, Ottawa had 7, right? Sean Burke was the general manager. Now he'll be the vice president of football operations. And then we'll see which of the remaining 6 will be brought back. But they had Jeremy Schneider as the assistant GM. He's been with them since the start of the organization. Brendan Tamman as director of pro personnel. He's a former CFL GM. Chad Hudson as director of Canadian scouting and football analytics. He's a bright young scouting mind. Philip Moreau, Assistant Director of U.S. Scouting and Football Operations. Drew Alamang as a Senior Personnel Executive. He was right up there with Sean Burke at the top of the Ticats organization as an Assistant General Manager and Co-Manager of Football Operations for many years. And then Joe Panacidi as Director of Football Operations. That's a lot of brain power and a lot of CFL experience and a lot of guys who know how to work with each other, who have established roles in that organization that Ryan Dinwiddie can lean on. And that is going to make things a lot easier for him, because even though he'll have that general manager title and will make the final calls on the roster, he's going to get reliable information from people who are dedicated to doing those jobs in their different facets. And I think he'll have an easier time of it as a result.
Why don't you bring in this next segment, JC?
The St. Mary's Huskies won the Loney Bowl and will host the Montreal Carabins in the UTEC Bowl. Meanwhile, the Queen's Gales upset number 1 ranked Wilfrid Laurier and will visit the Saskatchewan Huskies in the Mitchell Bowl. Hodge, which U Sports result surprised you most, and which national semifinal are you more excited for?
I think the most shocking result, hands down, was the Queen's Gales upsetting the number 1 Wilfrid Laurier Golden Hawks. The Gales picked off Cal Withers, who arguably should have won, or at least been the finalist out of the OUA for the Heck Crichton Trophy as the MVP of that conference 4 times in the first half. Now, I did not watch this game. It was happening, obviously, in concurrence with CFL action. But our guy, Griff Bourignon, was there representing 3DownNation, and he indicated, and you can read his column, that basically all of these interceptions came after receivers had their hands momentarily on the ball, or these balls were tipped at the line of scrimmage. So it doesn't seem like Withers should necessarily bear the brunt for the blame of these picks, though obviously they show up on a stat line. They're ugly. 4 picks from a quarterback in his first U Sports, I guess, Yates Cup anyway. It's not his first playoff game, but his first Yates Cup. But still, you got to give credit to the Gales. They were up 27-3 at halftime, and they held on to win 30-27. So it was a very close game in the end, but the Queen's Gales have won the Yates Cup for the first time since 2009. They will now travel west to play the Saskatchewan Huskies for the Mitchell Bowl. The Huskies were down big to the Regina Rams, scored 16 unanswered points to win that game. And I was going to say repeated as Hardy Cup trophy winners. The Regina Rams won that game last year against the Huskies. So Saskatchewan back to the Mitchell Bowl. Good for them. And then on the east side, I mean, for the uninitiated, the Atlantic University Sports Conference has fallen in recent years. There's no question about that relative to the other conferences in U Sports. This is a conference that did not have a U Sports draft pick, or did not have a CFL draft pick in 2025, just earlier this year, which is an indictment of the conference. I think it's fair to say. That being said, JC, the St. Mary's Huskies win 7-1. They then crushed their opposition in the Loney Bowl. And this defense has, I think the final score over Santa Fe, by the way, is 46-11. This defense is allowing and this is a real stat. They're allowing, I believe it's 8 points a game. They gave up 11 to Santa Fe. They entered this game giving up a little over 7 points. So I think it's now 8. So they've got the Montreal Carabin, a team that held on to beat the Laval Rouge et Or in the formerly Dunsmore Cup, now the Dussault Cup, a game that honestly I think should just be called the Carabin Rouge et Or Invitational, since they're the only two teams who ever play in it. But regardless, I think a lot of people are expecting Montreal to go into St. Mary's in Halifax there and absolutely blow the doors off the Huskies. And I got to say, I think we need to put at least a little bit of respect on the St. Mary's team. Their defense is shockingly good. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring UTEC Bowl between St. Mary's and Montreal. And I think if it's a ground and pound type of game where the Huskies are able to generate a couple of takeaways, it could be very close. It's been a long time since we saw an AUS team get to the Vanier Cup, which requires beating, right, the champion from another conference. I'm not saying this is going to be the year, but I think it would be foolish to write off St. Mary's is what I will say. I think there's a possibility that they can win this game. And frankly, part of me hopes they do. Why? Because I think the Saskatchewan Huskies are going to win the other game. And wouldn't we all love to see an all Huskies Vanier Cup? I know I would.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I think you hit the nail on the head here, Hodge. The Laurier loss was absolutely stunning to me. I did not think that Queens had a real shot in this game, and they pulled it off. So kudos to them. And I think that the UTEC Bowl is the more intriguing of these two matchups. Now, I suspect that the Mitchell Bowl will be more exciting with the Huskies going up against the Gales. But I think St. Mary's has a real shot here. The Montreal Carabin are a really good football team, but they slipped up against McGill this season. Let's not forget that. That was a huge loss for them. Typically, Montreal only ever loses when they face Laval. This time, they had one against the Redbirds that they let get away from them. And that St. Mary's defense is no joke. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on a young quarterback, a first-year quarterback for Montreal in Pepe Gonzalez, who has played exceptional football this year, but will now face the pressure and the lights of a national semifinal for the very first time in his career. Can he rise to that occasion, or will he shrink in it? I think everything that we've seen from him thus far would suggest that he's ready for the moment, but you never know with a young player. If he can pull it off, and dare I say it, if he can even pull off a Vanier Cup win, what a story and a star-making path that would be for Gonzalez. And I think the city of Montreal needs to send like a gift basket, some flowers, like a package of poutine to the country of Mexico, because, you know, Pepe Gonzalez, who immigrated when he was a child to Montreal from Mexico, has got the Carabin in the national semifinal. And then Jose Maltos Diaz is kicking game-winning field goals to send the Alouettes into the Grey Cup. There's something going down in Mexico that's doing pretty well for the city of Montreal.
Well, and let's not forget, 2023, the Alouettes and Carabin won the Grey Cup and Vanier Cup, respectively, in the same year. I think that was the first time that had ever happened. Obviously, fans in Montreal and Quebec would love, well, not Quebec City. They would be very upset about the Carabins winning the Vanier Cup. But for most of the province, most of those people would be, I think, very happy for that to repeat. I will be emceeing the CFL Fans Fight Cancer event at Tavern United in downtown Winnipeg on Saturday, November 15th. While the latter half of the UTEC Bowl is on and the first half of the Mitchell Bowl is on, hopefully we'll get the games on at that location. This event is open to anybody who wants to attend. So if you want to come down and say hi, raise some money for a good cause, please drop in. Hopefully we'll get a chance to watch some football and obviously enjoy some beverages, some good food, and some good times, and doing it while fighting for a worthy cause, right? CFL fans might not necessarily be able to agree on which teams to cheer for or what the rules should be, certainly as of late in this league. But one thing I think we can all agree on is that cancer sucks, and any opportunity that we get to come together and fight cancer is a good time and a worthwhile opportunity. So please join me down there if you're interested. It's the day before the Grey Cup, so if you're coming to town, you should be in town by then. 1 to 2:30 is my shift, but the event goes from 1 to 5 o'clock. And I don't know if I'll be there the full time. It depends on what other obligations I might have, but I will certainly be there for the first 90 minutes and be there to do some emceeing and raise some money for again, a worthwhile cause. JC, let's go to you for your random Nagalister.
Yes, indeed. This time I am looking at the BC Lions because Ryan Rigmaiden has made some great moves down the stretch as their general manager, and I've got to talk to him in a couple hours, and I doubt he's in a great mood right now after that playoff loss, so better butter him up on the podcast just to be safe. Receiver Cade Johnson out of South Dakota State was recently added to their negotiation list, and this is somebody I'd be quite excited about with the number of receivers that are pending free agents for the BC Lions. This could be somebody they bring in for 2026 who has some upside. With the Jackrabbits, he had multiple 1,000-yard seasons, an All-American, a Walter Payton Award finalist for the uninitiated. That is the FCS's version of the Heisman Trophy. And then after the FCS football season was canceled in 2020 due to COVID, he declared early for the NFL draft, actually went to the Senior Bowl. Didn't pan out for him. He went unselected, but signed with the Seattle Seahawks, spent a couple years with them, only dressed for a few games, but made 5 catches for 60 yards, both in the regular season and playoffs, and was most recently with the Birmingham Stallions of the UFL last year, where he was their second leading receiver, had 300 yards despite playing just 7 games. This is a guy who is 5'10 and a half, 184 pounds. You know, he's pretty quick, runs a 4.51, but pretty average athletically overall, and sort of got that knock going into the NFL as a slot-only player, that he couldn't do anything else, that he was very limited. But you watch him play in college, and he's a smooth runner, not necessarily a sharp route runner, but a guy who rounds things off, finds space, moves buttery smooth through the defense. He's tough. He's crafty. He had some success as a returner as well with that straight line speed. To me, that describes everything that you want to see in a CFL slot receiver at 27 years of age. I think it's about time that Cade Johnson made his way to the CFL. And with players like Aiden Eberhardt potentially going elsewhere in free agency as pending free agents, Cade Johnson is one of those guys I would target very aggressively to bring in to training camp next season.
Now, time for Hodge's heritage moment. On this day in 2000, Eddie Murray signed his final NFL contract to join the Washington football team. The Halifax native played 19 NFL seasons with 7 different teams, though the first 12 were spent in Detroit. The 2-time Pro Bowl selection won a Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys, a game in which the opposing kicker, Steve Christie, was also Canadian. JC, did you know that they were dueling Canadian kickers at one point in the Super Bowl?
I did know that, but that is still a remarkable fact. You don't think about it, but there have been some truly incredible Canadians at the kicking position in the NFL over the years. You even go back to the punting position with John Ryan playing in a Super Bowl and throwing playoff touchdowns to get the Seahawks there. I think we've passed the golden age of Canadian boots. There's not a lot of them out there, even if you look at the college ranks. But for a long time, there was some really, really good Canadian kickers who were making their way down to the NFL.
Justin has had to step out momentarily, so I will be handling his Canadian quarterback of the week, and I'm going to try to do it in a Justin Dunk impression, which hopefully is better than JC's John Hodge impression. So here I go. My Canadian quarterback of the week is Jake Farrell of the Saskatchewan Huskies. Straight baller. Second-year QB. Saskatchewan Huskies, 356 yards, 2 touchdowns in the Hardy Cup over the Regina Rams. I wish he played at the University of Guelph, where I was a Canadian quarterback. But this dude is legit. And for him to put up the game-winning points in the fourth quarter, unbelievable. Definitely worth my Canadian quarterback of the week.
I like you dropping the Guelph reference in there. That was very Doug. I will say, though, the voice was more akin to another member of the media who shall remain nameless on the podcast.
Oh, well, you could tell me afterwards. And hopefully our listeners liked it. I didn't tell Justin I was doing this, and I kind of did it on the fly because he's doing a radio hit. And we didn't want to schedule the podcast during a radio hit, but this was literally the only time we could do it on Sunday because this week's going to get crazy. And if you leave it for Monday, well, now chaos is struck. So JC's got to go to BC Lions locker room clean out. I'm going to be at the arrival of the Cup later today. And Justin's back for the 3-minute drill. Don't worry, I handled your quarterback segment. You'll love it when you listen back.
Hold on, who did you talk about?
I talked about Jake Farrell, the Saskatchewan Huskies.
Yeah, he was pretty good. I just wanted to get in on the U Sports discussion. Did you guys talk about the last time an Ontario team has won out west?
No, you can make that fun fact now.
It is a good fun
so
fact.
I've confirmed this, which seems wild, but the last university from Ontario to come west and win a football game, I suppose you could call it a bowl game, national semifinal, was actually the Queens Golden Gales all the way back in 1968 when they played in, what was the conference called, JC?
The OQAA, Ontario Quebec Athletics Association.
It's unbelievable. And it's actually only happened twice that a team from Ontario has come west and won a bowl game. The only other time you go to 1956 when the Western University Mustangs went out to UBC and beat the Thunderbirds. So just a little bit of history and context there that tells you how hard it is for a university from Ontario to come west and win. I remember, I believe it was 2013, the Mitchell Bowl in Calgary. The Western Mustangs had Will Finch at quarterback. That offense scored an insane amount of points, and I think Western was ranked number 1 in the country. And the Calgary Dinos, I almost said the Stampeders, ran roughshod over the Mustangs. Mercer Timmis was doing his thing. And there were some allegations, fellas, after that game that the Dinos might have had some screws in their cleats to get a better grip because they knew how to do things out west when it got snowy and icy.
Blake Neal would never break a rule.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like the home field advantage can help these teams out west, but to me that jumps off the page. I'm not saying the Queens Golden Gales can't come out here and win a football game in Saskatoon, but you know, the Huskies and a lot of their players are homegrown in Saskatchewan and have played in this weather a lot. So that's going to be the most intriguing game in terms of the 2 national semifinals.
It's now time for the 3-minute drill. Dunk, come on.
Sorry, I didn't know where you guys were at. I thought you had done the 3-minute drill already.
This is the slowest 3-minute drill that's ever happened.
Okay, 3-minute drill. Let's go. Hodge, you publish a list of 14 people who could potentially become the next Toronto Argonauts head coach. Who do you predict will get the job?
His name rhymes with Tris Moans. Ottawa City Council has formally, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if I had to put my money, that's where I'm putting it. Ottawa City Council has formally approved the Lansdowne 2.0 project, which will include new north side stands at TD Place Stadium. How big of a deal is that for the Redblacks?
I think it's a pretty big deal for the Redblacks. The plans are impressive, but the bigger aspect is they're going to have 2 years of reduced capacity here in 2028 and 2029 while these renos take place. That's going to put some strain on this organization. It'll be interesting to see what they do to compensate for that, and if the CFL throws them a Grey Cup in 2030 or 2031 just to make up for that lost revenue. Ryan Dinwiddie, the Redblacks' new head coach and GM, said he's, quote, comfortable with Drew Brown at quarterback. Who do you predict will be the QB in the nation's capital in 2026?
There's some intriguing possibilities being thrown around behind the scenes. And even though he said he's comfortable with Drew Brown as the quarterback, he also added that he's going to evaluate all options. And we know from his quotes in the past about Chad Kelly that he believes that Kelly is the best quarterback in the Canadian Football League. So I think if he actually have his choice, which he would never say on the record, it would be Chad Kelly. But I also have heard that he did like Drew Brown as a quarterback before going into this dual role position with Ottawa. So that is a very intriguing situation to watch play out in the offseason. Retired NFL great Jason Kelce upset Canadians for his comments about the Blue Jays losing the World Series, tried to make up for it by saying nice things about our country. And he added Zach Collaros is a wonderful, handsome, smart, and funny quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Hodge, did that at least make it up to you, considering you're a very, very proud Winnipegger?
Well, I mean, he didn't say anything about Winnipeg. He said something nice about Zach Collaros. I will say I don't take any offense to what Jason Kelce said about Canada. I didn't perceive it as a shot about Canada. And honestly, I felt a little bad for him, knowing how sometimes something you say on a podcast can get twisted and then turned and then pulled out of context and used to outrage people. So no, I didn't think Jason Kelce had to. I think he did or said anything wrong. He literally just said, I think he called the Blue Jays some team from Canada, and he pointed out that they have a payroll that's very high. They're not as high as the Dodgers, still very high. So I'm like, no, I don't take any offense. JC has said far worse things on this show about the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I also don't care about the Blue Jays, but I got no international outrage for it.
Well, clearly what you say doesn't matter as much as when JC Kelce says it, which, I mean,
That's
he's
fair.
on arguably the number one podcast in the world, so that makes sense. Last one, Team Canada beat Team Italy 20-17 in their first game of the Gridiron Nations Championship. Did that result surprise you?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it was that close and that Italy pushed Canada to the brink. After all, the last time Canada played Italy in April, albeit against a pared down Italian squad, they won 56-0, gentlemen. So this should be a wake-up call for the Canadians and for Canadian football fans in general, that even a team with a number of former CFL players on it, a number of former U Sports stars on it, can get pushed to the very brink by the best that Europe has to offer. Again, this is a team that was the bronze medalist in the European Championship, not even the gold medalist. They recently lost their semifinal game to, I believe it was Austria that they played, but they very nearly knocked off Canada here. Canada will have to sharpen up for their matchup against Germany next week.
Thank you, as always, for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. For Justin Duncan, JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. Subscribe to our newsletter for all the latest news, insight, and analysis from around the league. We're obviously going to be up to our eyeballs in that this week with the Grey Cup. Not only are the three of us in town, but also joining us are Pablo Herrera Vergara from Montreal, Joel Gasson from Regina. Like, we have arguably the largest contingency of any media outlet, other than, of course, TSN, which is the rights holder, which makes sense. So check it out, 3DownNation. We're going to be killing it all week long. And if there's questions you want answered, feel free to let us know. We'll do the digging for you.